Now, we're hearing how Perth residents are living with constant anxiety over flooding. The Craigie and Cherry Bank areas have faced 2 major floods in as many years. Janice Haig was forced to claim £35,000 from her insurance after damage to her home in 2020. She's founded Perth Community Flood Aid, who are inviting the public to join them at a meeting tomorrow.
Anything we can do to raise the level of resilience against flooding is definitely a step in the right direction. So it is about gathering information from the community to find out what they want.
Now, Perth community members are set to come together tomorrow and discuss how they can protect themselves from future flooding. Residents in the Craigie and Cherry Bank areas are being invited to attend the meeting following 2 major floods in as many years. Janice Haig is the founding member of the Perth Community Flood Aid.
Every day you're just constantly living with the fear of heavy rain, the fear of a thunderstorm. The anxiety is constant, that you hear heavy rain on, through the night on the windows and you're like, oh boy, how bad is this going to be?
Perth locals are invited to send questions to flood groups ahead of a meeting with local councillors this week. Campaign group Perth Community Flood Aid will take concerns to the meeting on Thursday. Janice Haig from Perth Flood Aid says we can't just wait for the next catastrophe.
What we want to do is just make sure that it's at the forefront of other people's minds as well, not just when there's been a flood and everybody's, angry about it or, sort of concerned and anxious then. It's also about every other time of the year as well.
And Perth councillors are to sit down with flood groups to discuss concerns later this week. Major concerns have been raised around planning applications and the impact that developments can have on flooding in local areas. Janice Haig is from Perth Community Flood Aid.
There's the perception, whether it's a perception or fact. People believe that development has a part to play, isn't the only part, but has a part to play in the number of flooding instances that we've had in the last few years.
Perth locals are being encouraged to attend drop-in sessions to discover the findings of the Craigie Burn flood study. The draft recommendations highlight a history of significant flooding in this area of the city, with most recently in 2020 and 2022. Janice Haig is the founder of the campaign group Perth Community Flood Aid.
It is really important that we get as many people along to these 2 events as possible. We have to show the council that the local community do want action taken on flooding. They will be behind the council in the actions that they take if they are taken appropriately.
Those in Perth who've been affected by flooding in the past are being urged to give their thoughts on the Craigie Burn flood study. Drop-in sessions are taking place at the Jurors Centre this month, where the draft findings will be published. Janice Haig is the founder of the campaign group Perth Community Flood Aid.
This is the most expensive flood study I think the council have ever undertaken. It's in an area that is at a very high risk of flooding, and I think if the community wants to be involved in how we move forward from that, I think this is the opportunity to do so.
Pressure is mounting on authorities after the recent flooding in Perth. A public meeting was held in Craigie on Friday for those who've been affected over the years. Janice Haig describes how she was last Sunday morning during the heavy downpours.
At 6 o'clock I went round to inspect the path to discover between 6 and 8 inches of sewage water, and it was pure sewage water on the path at my side of the tunnels and at my side of the floodgate.
Now, a Tayside MP warns global warming will make Perth's flood problem even worse. Pete Wishart organised a public meeting for locals in Craigie on Friday after some saw their gardens submerged with raw sewage amid heavy rainfall last weekend. He says authorities must act now.
This is why it's important we get the right infrastructure in place. But I think the event over the weekend just shows how vulnerable this place is. It was a different range of issues, of course, than the last event that we had here last September. So I think our job is to try and make people feel secure in their own homes.
We're told residents in the Craigie area of Perth live with constant anxiety over flood risks. A meeting was held on Friday at Craigie Church, where locals debated what their next step should be. It was the second gathering to be held in the area following two catastrophic floods in August 2020 and September 2022. Janice Haig lives next to the path in Croft Park.
We have had 26 flood warnings. Now, whether that ends up being for our area of Perth or not, you get that text message and that's the start again. So the anxiety is an everyday anxiety. It's every day watching the weather to see what's going to happen.
Perth residents' fears over flooding is intensifying.
The anxiety is an everyday anxiety. It's every day watching the weather to see what's going to happen.
Janice Haig, who lives in Croft Park, had her garden once again flooded with raw sewage during heavy rainfall last weekend. She and other locals got to voice their concerns at Craigie Church during a public meeting on Friday. Perthshire MP Pete Wishart organised the event.
Being flooded out your home is probably one of the most traumatic experiences you would ever confront as a homeowner. And like I live with the biggest river system in the UK with the Tay here, so we've had lots of experience of dealing with all this, and there's nothing worse.
Scottish Water and Perth and Kinross Council turned down an invite to Friday's discussion. Perth residents are hitting out at authorities for inaction over ongoing flooding issues. A public meeting held on Friday was locals' first opportunity to discuss the Craigie-Burn study, which highlighted several expensive recommendations to tackle the problem. But Janice Haig, who lives in Croft Park and just had her garden flooded last weekend, says the findings didn't offer her any assurances.
The study is very basic in its presentation to the public. There's not enough information to write the words not assessed, and then there's no explanation of any of the 13 options. It's just not good enough. It's half-hearted.
Our community flood groups telling us just how concerned they are about this weekend's heavy rain.
Every day we worry about flooding. Every day we watch the weather. Hopefully everybody will manage to get their flood prevention measures in place.
That's Janice Haig from Perth Community Flooded speaking as an amber alert for Perth and Perthshire has been issued. The region's been plagued by flooding in the recent past. Last month, barriers at the Craigie-Burn were overwhelmed, letting water into gardens and threatening homes. First this hour, we're hearing how residents in Perthshire can protect their homes ahead of a weekend of heavy rain.
You can use just black bin bags and fill them with soil to put them at air bricks if you don't have air brick covers. Or in front of your door, just anything that can fit inside a bag.
That's Janice Haig from Perth Community Flooded speaking as an amber alert for rain in Perth and Perthshire has been issued. It's likely some homes and businesses will be damaged as a result. A yellow alert's also in place for most of the country.
A month's rain in 24 hours has left devastation and major health alerts across Scotland. An overturned tanker in Aberfoyle has spilled kerosene and diesel into the watercourse. This woman says there are other hazards too.
There are a lot of locals who say this is absolutely the worst, because obviously the strength of the water is pushing over barrels, bins and all that's going into the water. So hopefully the services are all coming out to get it cleaned up.
Janice Haig from Perth Community Flood Aid says they've got a tough clean-up ahead too, and the flooding is taking its toll on locals.
People are they're fed up. The anxiety levels are through the roof. It just seems to be happening more and more often, and without much sort of happening from other agencies quickly enough.
A number of roads remain closed in the area, and there are reports of serious flooding in Aviemore.
People in Perth are being invited to a public meeting to find out how they can better prepare for flooding. Local resilience groups will be joined by the Scottish Flood Forum tomorrow at the Glenurn Community Campus to offer advice to residents. Janice Haig is from Perth Community Flood Aid.
We also want to find out how people feel about flooding. Is it just a mental thing? Is there physical effects? Do people not sleep? Is it the anxiety? The fact that they maybe don't go on holiday when they normally would because there's been flooding at that time? We just want to find out how flooding affects people.
Perth residents are being invited to a meeting on preparing and recovering from floods after recent storms. The Scottish Flood Forum and local flood groups will offer advice and listen to locals affected tomorrow at 12:30 at the Glenern Community Campus. Janice from Perth Community Flood Aid tells us what's been done to make the local community more flood resilient.
So we want to work with the Scottish Flood Forum to help individuals and the overall community become more flood resilient, whether that's through air brick covers, pumps, barriers across doorways, garages.